So guys, let's look at 1620. What page would that be on? 1647. Okay, so 1620, let's just look at this one. Francis Company has 24,000 shares of common stock outstanding at the beginning of 2013. Francis issued 3,000 additional shares on May 1st and 2,000 additional shares on September 30th. It also has 2 convertible securities outstanding at the end of the period. Now, those convertible securities are just various types of instruments that are sitting that can ultimately become stock, or bonds that can be converted to stock. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Now, number 1, convertible preferred stock. There's 2,500 shares of 8.5%, $50 par preferred stock were issued on January 2nd, 2010 for $60 a share. Each share of preferred stock is convertible into 3 shares of common stock. Current dividends have been declared and paid. To date, no preferred stock has been converted. Convertible bonds, bonds with a face value of $250,000 and an interest rate of 5.5% were issued at par in 2012. Each $1,000 bond is convertible into 20 shares of common stock. To date, no bonds have been converted. Francis earned net income of $72,000 during 2013. The income tax rate is 30%. Boy, that was a lot of information, wasn't it? It's kind of like, what do we do with that now? Don't shut down, though, okay? That's why we're doing it together. So, we're going to compute the number of shares of common stock that Francis should use in calculating basic earnings per share for 2013. Okay? So, where are we going to begin? We're going to start with the shares they started with. They started with 24,000 shares outstanding at the beginning of 2013. And then in May, we're going to make some changes. Make sense? How are we doing so far? So we're going to start with the January 1st through May 1st. We had, here, let me do this. Insert. This will be the time period. This is the dates. How about this? Date, time period, shares, weighted average. Okay? January 1st through May 1st, we had, which is basically 4/12 of the year, isn't it? No, I want 4/12. 4/12. Oh gosh. 4/12. Ah, you guys get what I'm wanting. How the heck do you do this? I was 4/12. Sorry, I've got that little doozy up there, but you get what the point is. 4 months out of 12 months, how many shares are there? 24,000. Our weighted average is 8,000. How did we figure out the weighted average? We just did 4/12 at 24,000. Okay? 0.33 of 24,000. Then, from May 1st to September 30th, what is it? How many months is that? May, June, July, August, September. 5/12. How many shares now did we add? We added 3,000 shares, didn't we? Francis issued 3,000 additional shares. So now we're at 24 plus 3 is 27,000 shares. What's our weighted average there, guys? 5/12 times 27,000? Guys, I'm going to expect you to know this, okay? Does it make sense? Then, wait, I didn't mean December. Did anyone catch my mistake? Okay, now, what happened from September 30th to December 31st? 2,000 more shares, and that's 4 more months, right? September, October, November, December. So 27,000 plus 2. I'm sorry, what am I doing wrong? Oh, October. Thank you. Wow. I think I'm tired, huh? So I need to get rid of that 3. Okay. Thank you guys for catching my errors. 29,000 times 3/12 is what? You would be worried when I'm like, it's 4 months. It's 4 months. Then you start worrying. You call Stu. You email him. Okay, so now what is our total here, guys? 26,500 shares, right? This is our weighted average of shares outstanding. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay? Don't you feel smart when you're in a room doing it together? And then you go home and you just like feel stupid again? The only reason I don't is because I have the solutions, okay? That's the only thing that holds me from you guys. Most of the time, seriously. Now, the next problem, or the next part of it, the next part of it says, calculate basic earnings per share for 2013. How much did they make? 72,500. Now we're going to have to do some interesting information with our preferred shares, okay? So what are we going to start at? Our basic earnings per share. It's going to be 72,500. But what are we going to need to subtract from this? What are our preferred dividends? Convertible preferred stock, 2,500 shares of 8.5%, $50 par. Right? Preferred stock were issued on January 2nd for $60 a share. Each share of preferred stock is convertible into 3 shares of common stock. Current dividends have been declared and paid. To date, no preferred stocks have been converted. So our preferred stock, again, remember they have first dibs on everything, don't they? So what is the amount that would be issued for specifically preferred? 2,500 shares times 8.5% times $50 is what? 10,625. Guys, you're always going to need to subtract those preferred dividends because common stock, they don't get them, do they? If they're going to issue dividends, they've got to pay the preferred first. Don't forget that, okay? Make sense? I say that too much, don't I? So we've got to take the earnings, subtract from that the preferred dividends, and we're going to divide that by how many shares? Common shares? 26,500. What's that going to end up equaling, guys? $2.33 earnings per share. Do you guys see really what we're doing? We're just breaking down some steps. What my goal is to help you see the methodical approach to this craziness. When you look at the book and you start from the beginning of the chapter to the end, you just shut it and walk away. But if you just start doing pieces at a time, it makes sense, doesn't it? We just have to follow an order of, figuring out what the shares are, and then subtracting the preferred to come out with the weighted average. Okay, what's the next problem we have here? The next one is calculate diluted earnings per share for 2013 and the incremental earnings per share of the preferred stock and convertible bonds. Oh no. But guys, hang in there. Just on one other step, okay? Let's see. What are we going to do here? We're going to diluted earnings per share. How are we going to determine those diluted earnings per share? So we need to then, instead of showing that those preferred shares are preferred shares, we've got to convert them into common stock, don't we? Right? So how many shares of a preferred share gets converted into how many shares of common stock? 3. So would it be safe to say that instead of dealing with our preferred shares, if we dilute it, 2,500 shares of preferred stock really equals 7,500 of common stock? Does that make sense? So let's go back and just try to figure out our number of shares. So we've got here 26,500 shares of common stock, and then to convert the preferred stock, it's 7,500 shares of preferred stock converted. Do you get what I'm doing? And then what about bonds? How do you convert the bonds? How do we convert the bonds over, guys?
You just do 250,000 divided by 1,000 and then times by 20.
250,000 divided by 1,000 times 20 equals, what is the conversion rate? Is that 5,000 shares? Right? So let me just read this again so I don't get myself too confused. The income tax rate is 30%. Okay? So again, our job here is to do the converted. So we've got here 72,500 plus how am I going to figure out 13,750 times 70%? 13,750. What am I missing? 13,750 times 70%. Diluted earnings and the incremental earnings per share of the preferred stock and convertible bonds. Share declare. Convertible bonds has an interest rate of 5.5% and were issued at par in 2012. Each 1,000 is convertible into 20 shares. No bonds have been converted. I'm, for some reason, missing something, but I'm going to tell you what we're doing, but to be honest with you, I got to figure out what I'm doing. So we're not subtracting any preferred dividends, but what we have to add to this is 13,750 times 70% at the tax rate. Okay, 72,000 minus 0 because there are no, plus this amount. Here are additional monies at the tax rate, which I got to figure that out. Divide that by, here are our total number of shares here. Okay, so Divide that by 39,000 shares. Divided by 39,000 shares. And that's ultimately going to equal 211. So diluted shares are at 211 instead of 233. What I've got to figure out is this 13,750. That was extra income coming in. Where did it come from? Interest rate of 5. So 250,000 at an interest rate of 5.5% is what? Thank you. And then we're taking since we're paying taxes on them at 30%, we're taking the after-tax dollars. Make sense? Yes? Yes.
One quick question about the back of the basic earnings per share. Where did the 10,625 come from? Is that the dividends?
Correct. For preferred share dividends. Because preferred shares always get paid first. And the way we calculated those preferred shares is we basically took the 2,500 shares times 8.5% at $50 and came up with that figure. Make sense? 10,000. So guys, basically, guys, what's happening here, I just needed to think a minute. When we have those bonds, we're paying out that money to the bondholders, aren't we? So our earnings of $72,500 include those bonds we're paying out, right? Does that make sense? But if we convert those, we're not paying those bonds anymore, are we? So that's why we're adding back that money. You guys get what I'm trying to say to you? How many are lost? The reason we're adding back that 13,000 is if we show it diluted, then we're showing those bonds are really stock. We're not paying on the interest. That's where we're adding back that. And then we're adding it and only taking 70% of it because there would be taxes on that money. Okay? Do you guys get that? Any questions on this one? Anyone need another break? Keep going for a little bit?
Where does the 75 or the 70% come from?
The tax rate is 30%.
Yeah.
So if we didn't pay, if there are bonds out, we pay $13,000 in interest. But if we convert them, there's no bonds to pay anymore. So we take that money, but since we have to pay income taxes of 30%, we only get 70% of it to give away. Make sense, guys?
I have a question.
Yes.
Is that tax rate, is that the marginal tax rate or the average tax rate?
Well, that's going to be the average tax rate.
Oh.
I mean, that's what they're paying on all of it. So let me just try to think. There's the marginal rate, I believe, I'm just sitting here trying to think of my formulas. That's the marginal or average, that's what they're actually paying on all of their income.
Okay.
So we're taking that money times 30%. That's what they were, by adding that.
Okay.
I guess you'd call that the marginal.
Okay.
Any questions on that one, guys, before we move on? How are we doing? What?
Sick.
Okay. Now, if we look at, this is an interesting piece. It's getting a little more complicated. You know what? I'm not going to mess with it. No. Let's just go on. So, number 4 says, assume the same facts as above, except the net income included a loss from discontinued operations of $18,000 net of income taxes. Compute the basic earnings per share and show how it should be reported to shareholders. You don't have to calculate diluted. But we know how to calculate diluted, don't we? Right? So let's now show in here a loss from discontinued operations of $18,000. What are we going to do now? How many, income from continuing operations is how much? $72,500. The net income included a loss from discontinued operations. Okay, so basically, if this net income included a loss of $18,000, this is a little tricky, so I'm not going to confuse you like this, but you have to think, if the income is really $72,500, and if that included a loss, what really is the net income before the loss? $90,500. Do you see what they're trying to get at? So the real net income, income from continuing operations, would be the $72,500 plus the $18,000 to be $90,500. See what they're trying to say? So you show the $90,500, and then you show the loss from discontinued operations of the minus $18,000 to come up with your new number of $72,500. So we know the $72,500 is going to have the earnings per share of $2.33. The only thing we have to do different here is take our shares of 39,000, and if we take 90,500 divided by our number of shares, 39,000, what did we get? That, whoops. This was 90,500. So if we take our 90,500, divide that by our earnings per share, it's not 2. That's 233 there. What's 90,500 divided by 39,000 shares? God, why am I getting that? Yes.
It's right. It's just rounding. After the 3, 2, it's all 5, 1.
But 90,500.
Divided by 39,000?
Yeah.
Yep, it's 2.32051.
3.01.
Nope. 2.32051. So it was calculating it right. It just didn't have as many decimals as my calculator.
But the 90,500, the common stock of 26,000, I'm converting it all.
Okay.
Yes, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Of 26,000 is what now? $3.01. Take out the 18,000 at 26.5 is minus the 68 cents. Gives us again the 232. All we're doing there is ending up with the same figures. We're just showing the portion that's by earnings per share being lost as a result of those discontinued operations. Does that make sense, guys?
Why don't we include the preferred dividends?
In this one, because it says to us, assume the same facts as above, except that net income includes a loss from discontinued operations. So you compute basic earnings per share, okay? So basic earnings per share is this one. The diluted earnings per share would be this one, okay? The diluted is where we take them and we assume that the bonds and the preferred stock have been converted, okay? But on basic earnings per share, we're only using those weighted averages, Do you understand the difference? Diluted is taking all those instruments that can be converted to common stock and converting them.
No, I mean like, on the basic earnings per share, we added preferred dividends.
Assume the same facts as above, except the net income included a loss from discontinued operations, net of income taxes. Compute basic earnings per share and show how it should be reported. It should be. Let me just see here. We should have, why wouldn't we? 90,000. We should. We should take this income from continuing operations. We should subtract out the 10,000. Do you know what I mean? That amount. You're exactly right. They screwed up in the book. But we should. You're exactly right, because we're still computing basic earnings per share. That's the other thing. This book,
Not perfect.
well, none of them are. It's amazing. You're exactly right. Thank you. Extra credit on that one. You want a break? 2-minute break?